Hello.
This is Kayla and Larson here. We are on the TazWorks team. We've actually both joined within the last year, so we're pretty new. I am over marketing, and Larson here is on our support team. He is one of our experts at data retention. He's learned everything there is to know, right, Larson? Pro. So we are going to talk to you guys about data retention today. And as we, are still letting some people join, I'm going to give a little bit of context just about what we are trying to accomplish today, so that you guys know what to expect as we go through and what kind of questions we'll be addressing. This webinar is focused primarily on how to configure your data retention settings that we've released in this first phase. So these became available on Monday, and we will be helping you kind of go through how to configure those, understand what they do, what the things mean, and what might be the best situation for your company. We are not going to be talking about the overview of data retention as a whole very much. We're focused very specifically on the first settings right now. And we are going to be focusing on those. We did do a webinar about a month ago, it was in November, that talked about kind of the overview of how everything will work. And we also talked a lot about the legal responsibilities and ramifications of different things. We had Scott Paler on as that, so to kind of go through that. So I'm going to paste some links into our chat as reference to those things, so that if you want to access those, then you have those available. And this webinar is going to focus primarily on those settings. So I'm going to turn off the webcam now, and we are going to start going through. Larson will be monitoring the chat and the questions that you submit. A lot of them we're not going to answer immediately. We'll kind of hold until we get to that point in the webinar. So he will try to respond to you privately, just let you know he's got it, and we'll address at the appropriate time. Or if it's something quick or something we've already covered, then he'll just recap that answer and make that question and that answer available to everyone. He'll also be posting some polls and quizzes as we go through, so that you guys can engage in this presentation. We want to make sure that everyone's understanding what we're talking about. There's a lot to cover. It can be confusing, and that everyone's following along. So we are going to do that, and then we'll be sharing more links with documentation as we go. So before we get started, can everyone hear me? You should have a little kind of sidebar control panel for the webinar. And if you raise your hand, you'll have a little thing to do that. Oops, sorry. I'm going to turn off my webcam now, and we are going to get started. So raise your hand if you can hear me. I'm going to give everyone a couple seconds just to make sure that everyone has sound before we keep going. So it looks like a lot of people have raised their hands. So I'm going to drop everyone's hands now, and we are going to start moving forward. All right. So the first thing that we are going to talk about, well, actually, before I even get into any of this, I'm going to talk about the structure a little bit. We're going to go through a lot of these settings pretty slowly, so that if you want to, you can literally follow along with us and just do everything along with us. And you can change your settings and go along. Like I said, Larson will be tracking your questions, and so we're just going to go through. I will put up some screens with documentation on the screen, as well as the actual settings. So the first thing that we are going to do is we are going to go to our data retention FAQ. We've got a lot of articles that we've created, and this is the one that we are going to kind of use as the very basis for for everything, and then we'll branch out from there. We are going to be doing this webinar is being recorded, so if you miss anything, we will have this available afterwards for you guys, and or if if other people in your organization weren't able to attend, we'll be sharing all of the links to our documentation in the chat. These are also available on our website, in software news, in our support section. And there's also in that sidebar that you have, there's a section called handouts, and that is, there's a checklist in there that you can download. It's a PDF, and that gives you a really simplified version of kind of the steps that we're going to go through, so that you can use that to follow along as well. So let's get started. The first thing that we're going to talk about is retentions. So you need to decide first who in your organization has the ability to edit your data retention settings. So I'm going to go into Manage CRA. I'm on our demo site, and I'm going admin, manage CRA, and we've created a new permission for this because this is something that is very specific in the system, to be able to make sure that that you can control exactly who does and doesn't have ability to do things. So I'm going to go into a user, I'm going to edit them, I'm going to go look at their permissions. And what we've done is users, we've put managed data retention and archiving as a subset of managed CRA setup, since this is managing how your CRA functions, but it's a much more specific thing that you might want to be more restricted. So it's a separate setting. Since this is brand new and we need to turn it on for somebody, by default, we've turned it on for everyone who already has the managed CRA setup permission turned on. You can go in and turn that off for anyone who you don't want to have access. This is something where it may be wise to have it pretty limited to just a few people, and we'll talk about some of the reasons for that later. So if you want to, you could be the only person who has the ability to do this. Turn it off for everyone else, even if they have managed CRA set up. So one thing to keep in mind with these permissions is that the managed data retention and archiving setting or permission is just for configuring the settings. It's for managing how it works. So if you want to have a processor or somebody in your organization be responsible for downloading files that have been exported and storing those somewhere specific, decrypting them, whatever, they can still be given the ability to do all of that after you've set it up. So this is just, how things are set up, and maybe you don't want to have a lot of people who have the ability to do that because they might override each other. So you can have just a few people with this, but anyone in your organization that you want to have the ability to access the archive, or that you want to have the ability to decrypt files, you can give them those things separately. So just to confirm that everyone understands that before we move forward, Larson's going to pop up a little quiz with a few options. It should show up on your screen, and you will be able to select from those what are the correct things that the data retention permissions does. So start submitting. You can select as many of these as possible as are true. So we'll wait and give people a few seconds to be able to submit some answers, and we'll see how it goes, and then we will talk about which one of these are true or not true. And I'm not going to give a huge amount of time to be able to do this because we're going to keep moving. We'll recap these. This is available. So it looks like we've had a decent number of people who have responded. So we are going to close the poll now and talk about the results of this poll. So Larson, all right, that's closed, perfect. So the first one was, if you have managed CRA setup, you can edit data retention settings. So I put this one in. It's a little bit of a trick question because if you have just the managed CRA setup permission, then you won't be able to have it. You also have to have this managed data retention and archiving. So it is possible for somebody to have one without the other, but right now, by default, we turned that on for everyone who has managed CRA setup. So it is true in the immediate future, you can change that in the near future. All right, so the next one was managed data retention is permission is required to configure archive access. That is true. You will need that. We will go into that very quickly, but you need the permissions in order to be able to configure it. You do not need it to be able to access the archive. Once you've configured it, you can give that information to whoever you want. So we have an article that specifically recaps these permissions and who has the ability, but Larson will share that in the chat. But you do not need to have the permission in order to be able to access the archive if you want to give somebody the credentials to be able to access it. Same thing with encryption, that if you want people to be able to set up encryption and decrypt stuff, then you can. They need to be able to have the setting in order to be able to do that, but they do not need it to be able to decrypt files if you then give them the information after setting it up. So, all right. Any other questions that are specifically about permissions? Give everyone a second. You can chat them in as you need to. Looks like we don't have any specifically about permissions. Can everyone still see my screen? You should see a permissions. If you can't, let Larson know. Looks like we've got a few people raising their hands saying that they can still see it. So, all right, we're gonna keep going. So next we're gonna talk about archiving settings. So again, going back to this FAQ, this is kind of where we're basing everything from. What do I need to configure for archive retention? We've done permissions. The next thing is the archive time frame. This is something that everyone needs to do, regardless of if you have the ability, or if you want to store data longer than 5 years or not. Everyone will do this. And so first I'm going to talk really quickly about what archiving does. So archiving means that a report gets locked from being edited. And there are a few things that can happen when a report is archived. So I'm going to open up this image larger here. So you'll see that there's a bar that goes across, we'll say this is an archived report. It'll have a status that says it's archived. And if you have exporting turned on, which we'll get to soon, then the export of those reports that goes into our external server will also happen at the time that the report is archived. Everything is still available within the system. It just looks a little bit different. It's locked from editing. And there are a few things that you can still do. You can still create a new order based on that order. So you can see that there's that thing is still available. You can still view and print the report as you normally would. You can change the report decision. So if something becomes disputed, then you can mark it as disputed in the report decision. You can send disclosures for that report. And you can manage your charges still. So if you need to change a charge for a client for whatever reason, you can still do that. But the content, the results of the report, you will not be able to edit. So the things that you can still do are in this article that we've linked in chat. And now we're going to talk about the time frame. So I'm going to go back to the settings here. I'm going to close out of this. I'm going to go back to manage CRA. And we're going to go to your preferences where we have your data retention. So if you scroll down just a little bit, then you'll see that the first thing is archive reports. And your time frame is relative to your expiration time frame. So everyone, you already have an expiration deadline that is within your system. And if you're not sure what that is, you can ask support about that, but it's anywhere from 30 to 90 days. And after a report is expired, that means you can no longer add things to the order. So now we're just adding an extra deadline for archiving that can be anywhere from 10 to 60 days after that expiration date. So your total ends up being anywhere from 40 days, so 30 plus 10, or all the way up to 150 days, so 90 plus 60. And what happens after after archives is it just becomes uneditable. If you've got exporting set up for some of your clients, that will happen. Everything still stays in the system. You don't lose anything. That's the only change. If you, by default, we have this set to 60 days. So if you are happy with the 60-day time frame, then you don't even need to change anything. If you are, if you want it to be shorter, you want archiving to happen quicker because you don't want the liability of, you know, having things being edited for such a long time, then you can have that be quicker, whatever you want to do. So we are going to keep going. Before we do, just by raise of hand, how many of you have your time frame configured the way you want to for archiving? All right, got some hands. All right, so we've got some people doing stuff. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about what happens when reports are archived. So So I'm looking at some questions that were submitted ahead of the webinar when people registered, and then if we've got some additional ones, then Larson will help me make sure that we get those addressed as well. But some of these first ones that we have, somebody asked, do we legally need to store client data for more than 5 years? So I'm not going to go in depth on this because, like I said, we've got that webinar with Scott Paler where we talked more about legal ramifications, and he covered that. But per that webinar, there are no legal regulations or industry regulations why you would need to keep anything that long. His recommendation in that webinar was that most CRAs, a 2-year time frame would be sufficient, but obviously you may have a lot of different circumstances with your particular CRA, your particular clients that may make that different. So if you have a client that you've agreed that you're going to keep on hold of those files for the entire life of the employee, then, or the time the employee is at that company, then obviously you would have some different requirements. So, but in terms of industry regulations, there isn't anything that would require you more than 5 years. And you can go refer to our webinar, to our previous webinar to learn more about that. How long will you be able to edit reports once they're completed? That's that anywhere from 40 to 150 days, the total of your expiration timeframe plus your archive timeframe. And then somebody asked, if a consumer disputes the results of a report after it's been archived, we cannot make changes to the original report, which is correct. It will not be editable anymore, as you see here. But you know, we need to provide a corrected report per FCRA regulations, which is also correct. So there are a few things related to this. I'm going to talk about a few different aspects. The first thing is that your time frame before this becomes archived, you can set all the way up to be 150 days. So from us talking to a lot of different CRAs, we've heard that, you know, it seems like most of the disputes that you guys get are within that time frame. You know, it's almost 5 months, so it's a pretty long time. Hopefully most people are disputing before that time frame. And you know, if you have a report that's closed and you reopen it, then the archive date is reset to when it's completed again. So you know, if you reopen something, that pushes it back. And even if you're notified on day 149 that there's a dispute, you can still put on a lit hold. So we have this postpone archiving due to legal hold. And if you check that box, then it is going to stop anything related to our data retention policy. So nothing will archive, lock, be exported to the external server. Once we have purging in place, nothing will be purged for the entire time that that is in place. So obviously if you get a dispute, you know, the same week that you send out your pre-adverse or adverse action about an applicant, then you probably don't need to turn that on. It's going to be resolved quicker than that. But if you are really close, then you do have that option. So let's say though you do get a dispute after 150 days and you want to be able to address that because you need to be able to rectify that for those people. You can still create new reports based on that applicant. And so what we recommend doing is that you create a new report and you know, make sure all the information is corrected. You provide that, so you're still providing a report with all the correct information to the client, to the consumer, whoever you need to. And then you can contact us if you would like to have the old version of the report deleted completely from your system with the inaccurate information. We will get rid of that. And you know, this is a little bit of a workaround, you know, having to contact us, but from what we've learned with talking to you guys is that this sounds like it's going to be something that's extraordinarily rare if it does happen at all. And so we're leaving out that right now, where if this does happen, you can contact us, we will address that. If it doesn't, great. If it starts happening a lot and we see this being a pattern, then we'll build some more functionality so you guys can address that more directly. But until we see that, then we're here to help you. You can still you know, provide that new corrected report to the people you need to, and you can still get rid of the inaccurate information in your system if you need to. So we're going to keep going on to the next question. Hopefully that addresses all of that. Somebody mentioned our client needs access for 5 years for renewals. We want to give them the files after 5 years. What settings should we use to do it? So right now, we don't purge anything from our system. Everything's still there for a long time. We will be adding the purging later. But if you have your time frame set to 5 years, which will be the maximum, then for that entire time, you can still create new reports based on old ones. So you could reorder a report after 5 years. Monitoring, if you use monitoring, which is a really great tool to be able to actively, you know, make sure that if somebody gets a criminal conviction, you know, 6 months after the background check was run, that like that'll still come in. You can, all of that will still work. So you can still have that going for the entire 5 years. You can reorder at the 5-year mark. After 5 years, then it will be deleted from the system. And if they need to be storing it longer, then you'll just follow the rest of the settings that we're going to go through about how to export those files for that client to store longer term. So we're gonna do one more quiz now. This one, just to get like a feel for, you know, everyone's needs. How long are you guys planning on storing data? What, either for you or your clients, how long do you need data to be accessible? Are you planning on 5 years being the most that you're going to store, or do you think that you are gonna store data for longer than 5 years for some people? So we've got about half of you that's voted. I'm gonna let it go just a little bit longer. It looks like most of you are 5 years or less. So, all right, so we're gonna close that poll now. And 81% of you said that you're going to be storing data for 5 years or less, which is a huge amount of you. So the really good news for you guys is that you're actually done at this point. All the rest of the settings that we're going to talk about, the things that we're going to go through, only apply if you want to export data to be stored more long term, that you need data longer than 5 years. So it looks like there are 19% of you who are responsible who said that you do need to store some of your data for more than 5 years. You guys can stay on, but the rest of you, if you want to drop off, then you can. If you want to stay around, just kind of see what there is, you're of course welcome to stay on longer. But this will also all be documented in our support articles. This recording will be available, so you can always refer to it later if you need to. I'm going to see if there are any more questions that we have related to this stuff before people drop off if they want to. Oh, so somebody asked, what does expiration mean? We mentioned this briefly, but your expiration time frame is something that's already in the system. This isn't a new setting, and that just means that you can't add anything new to the order at that time frame. How do you set expiration dates? I believe that it's actually something that is turned on or configured for you when you're getting your CRA set up, and I don't think that there is a UI for you to be able to do that yourself. So if you want to customize that date or confirm what it is, you can reach out to support and they will help you do that. We'll look at seeing if we can make that more accessible in the future, but for now you'll need to reach out to support for that. Yeah, your clients will still be able to access all reports. The only thing, like at this point right now, with just having settings, nothing changing for your clients at all. The only thing that will change is once reports hit that archive time frame, let's say you have it at 150 days, then it will change that they'll see this little blue banner that says it's an archived report. The status of it will be archived. But nothing else will change for them since they can't edit reports anyways. That's really the only main functionality that's being lost. They weren't able to do that before. So they, this is just a little blue banner. That's the only thing that's changing. Nothing's being lost for them. No functionality, no ability to view reports, any of that stuff. So go through, do we have any other questions? I'm just reading this one. Yeah, we are going to talk more about the encryption software. That'll be closer to the end of this webinar. So they will be able to, so if you want to stay on and learn more about that, you can do that. Somebody from my team just reminded me that this little I here on archive reports shows what your current expiration time frame is. So I have archive reports set at 60 days, and then in this it says currently your reports expire 60 days after they are completed or canceled. So right now my total is reports would archive 120 days after the report is completed. So that is the full time frame. If you want to change that, then you can reach out to support, but you don't need to reach out to them in order to be able to change that. Phase 2, when we actually turn on archiving, will roll out probably sometime in January. And we are gonna, make sure that we've worked with everyone, that they feel comfortable with things. We're having this webinar, trying to train everyone, make sure people feel comfortable addressing any urgent needs that anyone might have before we turn that on. So we don't have a firm deadline yet, but it'll probably be sometime in January, and we'll give you guys lots of announcements and warning in advance so that you know that that's going to start happening. All right, any other questions before we keep moving? Okay, great. So if you are not storing data for anyone longer than 5 years, you're welcome to drop off now. If you're curious, just want to stick around, you're welcome to. And we're gonna keep going. So the next thing I'm gonna come back to, I'm gonna close out some of these other things. I'm gonna come back to this FAQ article that we're using as our basis, as our kind of guide. And if you remember, there's a handout in your controls for this webinar as well that has kind of a really simplified checklist. So you can also look at that. If you do want to keep files for any of your clients longer than 5 years, you're still configuring those. And then we're gonna open up this next article about how to configure client export settings. So the first thing, it's just kind of covering what happens when you're exporting a file, but I'm actually going to skip through a lot of this pretty quickly, and we're going to go through what happens when you're exporting a little bit more in depth. We're going to talk about the setting up. There are a few steps that you have to do before you even can set up exporting. But so just so you know, like whether you turn exporting on or not, nothing changes about the way archiving works and about what your clients can see, about what you can see in the system, all of that stuff. Exporting is just in addition. This means that you are creating a PDF that will be exported to our external server in order to be able to store it, download that and store it more long term, so that you have a way to be able to get all those files in bulk and securely if you want to store them longer than 5 years. That is just in addition to everything that stays in TazWorks. So nothing changes if you turn this stuff on. This is just in addition to that. So before we set up exporting, we need to do a few other things. We need to set up our archive access. So I'm going to open up this article that walks you specifically through that part. Before we go into how to set up, I want to talk very briefly about FTP, or File Transfer Protocol. And what that is just a way for for you to be able to, for us to be able to transfer files that are a large number of files in bulk and very securely. And so there are a lot of different FTP servers and protocols, ways that you can do that. We use Amazon S3. Amazon is, one of the gold standards for security and just doing things really well. So that's what we are using for this. You can access it a lot of different ways, though. You can use command line coding if you know that. I'm not a programmer, so I'm not going to do that. I assume most of you aren't. You can use a lot of different programs to be able to access an FTP server. The one that we're going to talk about is CyberDuck. It's one of the best programs there are out there. It's available on Mac and PC. And so that's the one that we've chosen as a company to, help our users understand. And we'll go through that and talk about it. But if you want to use something different, you of course are welcome to. So before we get too far into that, I want to we're going to do another quiz. What happens when files are exported to the external server? Just to make sure that everyone's on the same page, knows what's happening. So you've got three options. They'll be deleted from TazWorks. They won't be editable in TazWorks anymore. They'll appear as an encrypted PDF in the external archive. We're going to let people participate, vote really quick. Got a few people going. Another few seconds. All right, and we're going to close that now. So a few of you answered they will be deleted from TazWorks. That is false. Everything stays within the TazWorks system until your purge date, which we don't even have as an available setting yet. So everything's staying there. Nothing's being deleted yet. When things are exported to that server, it's in addition to. So that part's false. They won't be editable in TazWorks anymore. That is true because they are archived and exported at the same time. And they will appear as an encrypted PDF in the archive. That is true. That's the whole point of the archiving. All right, so let's talk about how to configure CyberDuck. So if you've already installed CyberDuck, let's do by raise of hands. How many of you have installed CyberDuck? If you're planning on storing files longer. We've got a few of you. All right, so we'll go through that. If you want to download it really quickly, you can do that. If you are just here listening just for educational information, then of course you can just continue listening. So we're going to share a link about how to configure CyberDuck in the external archive. And I'm going to walk you through some of these things. I am going to switch over to the settings again, and I'm going to shrink this down, and I'm also going to open up CyberDuck so that you can see what it looks like. So I've already installed CyberDuck. When you install it, you won't have this QA server here. This is me. I was doing some testing and created a bookmark in advance. So yours will just look completely blank, but everything that we're going to do is the same either way. So what I'm going to do is I am going to go to Action, and I'm going to create a new bookmark. And it's going to give me a bunch of fields that it asks me to fill out. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to Amazon S3 up here, because that's what we are using to host all of these files and deliver them to you. So you'll want to put Amazon S3 up there, and then you can put in a nickname. This can be anything you want. I am going to call this, I'm going to call it the TazWorks demo server, since I'm on our demo instance of our software. You can name it whatever you want that's easy for you to understand and doesn't look like it's just a bunch of gibberish. You don't need to do anything with the URL or the server, and then you're going to see this access key ID. This is the first thing that you're going to need to do within TazWorks. So you'll see that my button here says reset access key. That's because we've done some testing already on this. Yours will just say like to set an access key or create the archive access key. I can't remember exactly what the wording is, but when you click on that, it's going to give you some information. Every time you click this button, it will generate completely new information. And so you want to make sure this is one of those reasons why you would want to have fewer people who have the ability to configure your settings, because the setting is for your entire CRA, not just for a single user. And so if you click that button, you're going to change all of those, which is really great. Say if you have somebody who leaves the company and you want to, it's basically like changing the password to a login on your website or whatever. You can change the access credentials, but it's going to cause everyone in your company who uses that to lose access until you give them that new information. So we're going to keep that up for a second. It's a good idea to screenshot this or copy and paste it somewhere. I'm just going to leave it here, and I'm going to come back to our server. We want the access key ID first. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm just going to paste it in here. And then your more options may be collapsed. You can just click on that to expand it. And the next thing that you want is the path. So I'm going to come over here, copy that part. That's going to go in. And then you don't actually even need to do anything to save this. It'll save automatically. So I'm just going to exit out. It's there. And you'll notice I didn't use the secret access key yet. That will be asked for when you try to open the server. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to double click into this, and then it's going to ask for that secret access key. So I will copy that and paste that in. That will be stored on your computer. I've got add to keychain checked. So I hit login, and now it takes me into that server. We haven't turned archiving on now yet, so there are no files that have been exported here. There's nothing here. It'll just be empty for a while, but you have the ability to access your archive. You're in there, you can see it. If you give this information, these archive access credentials, anyone else in your organization can also access this server. So that's where if you have somebody, you don't want them to be able to set up the information, but you want them to be the one responsible for downloading files, just copy this information, give it to them, send them a copy of this article about accessing the external archive using CyberDuck, or they can watch this webinar. So that is how you can configure CyberDuck. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to hop into this QA server, and I'm going to show you what it looks like when you actually do have files that have been exported. So what you'll see first is this folder with a file name. And there are two parts of this. There's one that's AAA client. That is your client name, so that it's easy for you to recognize, look for the client that you want. You can search here, and so you can do that. You can find, if you've got a whole bunch of clients, you can easily jump to the one that you want. But we also have this thing that looks kind of like gibberish. It's just a string of numbers and letters. What that is your client's unique ID. So you may have clients who have the same name. And in order to make sure that they don't accidentally get each other's files, every client has a unique identifier. So if you go into Manage Clients and you open up any client, then you will see at the bottom of this page that there's a client ID there. So you don't need to know that because we also have the client name there, but if you want to, or if you have multiple clients with the same name and you want to make sure you're going into the right one, then that client ID helps you distinguish those. So when you open it up, then you'll see that you have a whole bunch of files. They are ordered by, entitled by the report number. So this one's 10,030, 23,850, and you'll see that there are several files for each report. Most of them have the report itself. They have notes, so you can keep those separate, and then some of them have attachments as well, if disclosures were sent, authorizations, any of that kind of stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to download some of these and show you how that would work. It's really easy to do. You can select as many things as you want. I'm just going to do these two reports, let's say. And I'm going to right click, and I'm going to, you can just download, but I'm going to say download to, so you can send them to a very specific place. If you've got somewhere you want to hold things, then you can decide where in your computer you want them to be. I'm going to download them to my desktop so that it's easy for us to see those. And unfortunately, it's downloading to my other screen, so I'm just going to drag them over really quick. And And there they are. Okay, so you'll notice that these are have some kind of weird file names. They've got a .pgp on there. That means that these are encrypted. So that is for the most security possible to make sure that no one is accessing personal information who shouldn't be able to. So we can't view those files. We can't do anything with them yet. We'll get to that really quickly, and we'll talk about how to decrypt those. But before I do, does anyone have any questions that are specifically about this part of configuring the archive? Doesn't look like we have any new ones. All right, well, that's good. Hopefully that means I'm not screwing up too much. So a few more notes about this is, you can download them all at once in bulk. You can download just one at a time if you know the file number and you're just going to get something specific. But you do need to, once we implement data purging, the files will be deleted from the external archive at the same time they are deleted from within the TASWORKS software. So we are only holding them for whatever that time frame is that you set, and then they will be deleted. So you're responsible for downloading these. You can store them wherever you want to, but this is not a long-term forever holding place. This is still only up until your time frame. So if your time frame is 5 years, then you've got a pretty long time where, and let's say your archive date is 150 days after the completion date, then you have 4.5 years basically to go in and download those files before they're deleted from here. So that's a long time. If you have somebody who's responsible for doing that within your organization, you can have them go in and do it just once a year even, and you'd be getting everything. Or you can also use the reminder that we have in the system. So I'm going to go back into your data retention preferences, and I'm going to scroll down, and you'll see that there's an archive reminder email option. And so what that does is it will send you an email every month to remind you that, hey, there are things in your archive, you should go download them sometime before they get deleted, so that you can kind of stay on top of that. You're not downloading an astronomical number of files all at once. You're just kind of keeping it smaller. By default, we've filled in the contact email that is the primary contact for your CRA, but you can change that to anything you want. You can replace it. You can also add another one. So if I wanted to also have it be testing@tasworks.com, I could add that. You just separate it by a comma. So if you have a specific person in your organization that you are planning on being responsible for downloading these files, then you can put their email address in there in addition to yours, instead of yours, whatever you want to do. Or if you don't want to get those emails, if they're annoying, if you want to only do it once a year and you don't want to get an email every month, then you can just erase that field completely. But we've put something in there by default just to help you remember, since this is something that's new. So just by show of hands, how many of you have decided who's going to be responsible in your organization for downloading files if you are downloading them? Do you have any? Looks like we've got one person. All right, you're on top of it. You're the only one so far. So we will, that's something you can decide at the same time that you're doing those settings, or figure out within your company whenever. So we're going to keep going. We're going to do another quiz just to, or this one's more of a poll just to see kind of how you guys are thinking. How are you going to store the data that you download? If you're doing this download, oh, I forgot to ask that one actually. Leave that up, Larson. So this is another thing that I forgot to talk about. We'll see how smart you guys are. So you can select one or more of the following options. What happens if you reset the archive access? The options are: anyone who had access before will lose it, any CRA users with a new key will be able to access it again, or files on the old archive access key will be lost. So, all right, you guys are smart. Let's close that. Looks like most people got the right answer. So anyone who had access before will lose it, because
because you need to have the right credentials. So if you reset the credentials, then they don't have any more. You know, the same way if you reset the password to your Netflix account, then your friend can't access it anymore. So you'll need to give them the new password, those new credentials, but they will be able to access all of those files again as soon as they get the new key and then insert that. You're not going to lose those files in any way if that gets reset. So that's just something that could potentially be inconvenient, but there's nothing terribly drastic that will happen with that. All right, so we're going to keep going to our next poll now about how will you store data that you have downloaded. If Larson, if you can pop up that one as well. And this one is just kind of see, you know, what you guys are planning so that we know how best to serve you and we know what we should be doing with our with this as we keep going forward. This is all kind of, you know, stuff that we've planned, but we can make improvements as we go forward. And we want to make sure that we understand what your guys' needs are. So, all right, let's close that. It looks like you guys are pretty evenly distributed. Most of you are planning on storing the files for your clients. Some of you have planned how you are and where and how you're going to store those. Some of you haven't figured that part out yet. And then a quarter of you are planning on giving those files to those clients. So if you want to do that, you know, you can transport those files however you want them. You could set up your own FTP server if you want, so you're just taking them from ours and transferring them to another one. It's pretty cheap to have an FTP server configured, and so if you've got somebody, an IT person on your team that can do that, that's a great way to do that, or you can figure out whatever else you want to do. So, okay, any questions about the archive? We're going to move on to encryption if not. Okay. All right, you guys are doing great. So encryption, Larson's going to paste the link into the chat about this, and I am going to move on to the next step. So we're still in this article, you know, about how to configure client reports. We're moving to the next step of something that you have to do before you can get there. Oops, and I just closed the wrong tab. So decrypting and encrypting files. So these files obviously all hold a lot of personal information, which we want to be very careful about how we're handling that. So we are encrypting all of these files. That's why they have that .pgp extension on them. That means that it's encrypted, and we are going to, you know, help you guys keep those things as secure as possible. This is one of the settings that has the most potential for there to be problems if you have a lot of people who have the ability to manage your data retention settings. So I'm going to collapse that for a second. So this is one of the things, definitely think about who you want to have the ability to do that and keep that list short. So I'm on Mac, so I've downloaded GPG Keychain or GPG tools. There are two different programs that you can use. I just went to gpgtools.org to be able to download it. If you're on a PC, you can use GPG for Win. And both of these, you know, with these things, these programs are external programs because what this is we're not, you know, it's the same way that you use Adobe to view PDFs or whatever. These are programs that do tasks. It's not something that's unique or specific to TazWorks. We're encrypting a file, and these are programs that you use to decrypt it the same way if we gave you a PDF, you would use a PDF software to be able to view that. So we are using external programs. These programs are all free to use, and they're all very highly recommended, pretty standard in the industry. So there's you should be okay to use those things. So I have downloaded and installed GPG Keychain. I've got something here for an access key that I've already set up. You won't have that there. You will have this one that's just a, you know, basically a practice thing from GPG Tools to help you see kind of what things will look like. And when you first open this program for the first time, you may be prompted to like create a key pairing or something. You can just exit out of that. That is, you know, them trying to be helpful. And if you're trying to set up to encrypt something, then that's what that prompt is. But we're not trying to do that. We're already encrypting things. We're just trying to get the keys for it. So what we are going to do is go to Manage CRA, and we're going to go to the Set and Download Private Encryption Key. And what this does is when you click on it, you'll create a passphrase. This passphrase, same as the archive settings, these things will be universal to everyone in your CRA. So don't use your personal password that you use on like other accounts. You want this to be something that's common for your company. And you can put in whatever you want. I'm just going to put in TazWorks123. We do require you to confirm it, because if you don't know that passphrase in the future, there's going to be a lot of problems. So we want to make sure that like a typo doesn't accidentally, encrypt all your files in a way that you can't access. So I'm going to put in TazWorks123 again, and I'm going to read this message. Obviously, you can read it on your screen, but I'm going to read it just to reiterate it. Continuing will download your private PGP encryption key to your computer. TazWorks doesn't save or store this key and cannot recover it. Archived files will not be able to be viewed without this key. For security against stolen key files, the PGP encryption key can be protected with a passphrase. It is recommended that the encryption key and passphrase are not stored together. All right, so just to reiterate, your passphrase, we're not storing that, and your encryption key that you're about to download, we are not storing that. The reason is that like we are giving you your data, and it is now your data to do with what you want. It's not our data anymore, so it is encrypted, and you get to manage that encryption and manage who has access to it. We don't have access to it anymore once we put it in that server. We've got those files, but we can't read them. So do not lose this passphrase. Put it somewhere really important, screenshot it, copy and paste it, send it to whoever else is going to be needing to access these files, and then make sure that you know what that is. So I'm going to click I understand, and when you do that, it's going to generate and download a private encryption key. And so I'm going to save that to my desktop again. And I'm going to drag that file over here. And so both of these things are required in order to be able to unlock a file. It's a two-part key, and we don't have access. Basically, we know what kind of lock we need to build, but we don't know what key. We don't have the key to be able to open it. So we're just locking these files. So what you're going to do, it's really easy. You're going to click Import Key. You're going to choose that file, and you're just going to click Open, and it's going to bring it in. Oh, 0 keys. Yeah, import successful. Okay. No, that didn't work. I'm gonna try again really quick. All right, I'm not sure why that's not working right now. I will check on that and get back. Promise it does work. I've already done it 7 times today. So we've got that in there, and we are going to, what I'm actually going to try doing, no, I'll just leave it. So we're going to leave that in there, and I'm going to use the one that I already had in here, because that's the one I'm going to use to be able to decrypt these files. So just to reiterate, you need both the encryption key, which is a file. So make sure you pay attention to where you're downloading that on your computer. You don't want it to just go into your downloads file and like get deleted after a while. Make sure you're saving that somewhere really important. Make sure that whoever else needs to have access to these files also has that. And then make sure that you have that passphrase. You need both of these things, or all of the files that have been encrypted using those, you will not be able to access. So these are really, really, really important things. And this is also why you want to make sure that you don't have a lot of people editing this, because if you change your encryption key, it's going to change it for new files. Those new files that are exported, they'll be created using, we'll put that new lock on them, basically, that corresponds to your new keys. But any of those old files are still going to need the old key and the old passphrase. So do not lose those, or you will lose access to that data. You will not be able to read it. So I'm going to go in now. I'm going to open up CyberDuck again. And actually, no, I already downloaded the files. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to decrypt all these files. So what you're going to do, you can decrypt all in a batch, same as you would with downloading. And you go to services here, and you're going to say open PGP and decrypt file. And when I do that, it's going to say decrypting files, decryption finished. Okay, it put them on my other monitor, so I'm just going to drag these over really quickly. And you'll see that it creates a copy of them, and that's because you don't necessarily want to get rid of the encrypted one. Maybe you're likely storing all of these in an encrypted format so that they're as secure as possible, and you just want to decrypt one file to be able to reference it, but you want to leave everything else encrypted, and once you're done with this, maybe you're going to delete that. So it creates a copy of it, and then you'll see that all of these correspond. So if you open up the report to these, let's open up this one, then it's going to have information. It's going to have headers so that you can see all the different things that were included in it. You can jump through and see all of the different information that was included in that report. So you can go through it pretty quickly. It's got everything that would be included in your consumer copy. You also have your report notes that you know, so that you can know what you were doing internally, make sure that you still have access to those. And then it'll also create an attachments folder, and it'll zip those together. So if you double click on that, then you'll get that folder, and you'll see that there are two different forms in here. One of them has the disclosure regarding background investigation. It's got the different locations that were included in it. It shows that they acknowledged it. It shows when it was submitted, where it was submitted from. So you've got a record of the authorization exactly as it was when they signed it, And let's open up this other one. And this has, you know, similar thing where they've got selected option 1 that they're willing to do this electronically. It's got the time and location that that was done. So you have all of these files. They are all corresponding to your file number. Once they're decrypted, then they're the same as any PDF, where you can search within those files and search for something. And so if you had a folder, you know, if you knew that, say, the file had been done or the order had been done with a certain time frame, but you didn't know the specific file number, you just knew a range, you could decrypt all of those and then just search for the applicant's name, and it'll be able to find it within that report and give you the correct one to be able to do. So that is how to encrypt those files and or decrypt those files, and then you've got them. So you can have everything decrypted or encrypted. You can store it the way that you want to. You can go back and forth between those. You've got access to all that information in both places until the time that that your purge date is set. So do we have any questions about decrypting your files? Nope, looks like we're good. All right. So we're going to do one last quiz just to reemphasize what happens if you lose your encryption key. And this one's just an either or, multiple choice, no checkboxes here. All right, we've got 100% consensus, which is good. So we'll close that poll. You will never be able to decrypt those files if you do not have that passphrase or that encryption key. So make sure you do not lose this. This is really important to keep. And if you change it, then the old one will still apply to all the files that were archived using that one or exported using that one, and the new one will just apply to the future files that are exported using that new one. All right, we just got a couple minutes. We've gone a little bit long. I'm going to go really quickly to the last couple things. It'll be just a couple more minutes. So I'm going to close out of GPG now, and I'm going to expand this window again. So the last thing, we have set up our archive access, we've set up encrypting and decrypting reports, so now we're ready to set our client report export preferences. So this is where, you know, most of you, when you said that you were going to be doing it for some of your clients, it was just a very few clients. You don't want to be storing it for all of your clients at once, because that's just a huge amount of data and leaves you more open to and liable for data, you know, breaches or anything else. So you're probably just doing it for a few CRAs. So that's why we've turned this as a individual CRA set or client setting. You will not be able to do this setting if you don't have the permissions for data for data retention settings, or if you haven't already set up your archive access and encryption key. You have to set those first because otherwise the files won't have anywhere to go or they won't be able to be encoded. So once you've got those done, then you're able to do that. So you'll go to admin, manage clients, go into whatever client you choose. And under preferences, there's going to be a section as well that you'll scroll down to. It's close to the bottom and it says data retention. It's just a single checkbox. Save this client's reports into the external archive. And so if you turn that on and you've already done everything else, then once we turn on archiving, it will start exporting that client's files at their archive timeframe into that external archive. Right now, it's not going to do anything since we don't have that turned on. And when we first turn this on, it will, go back and try to archive all and export all of the files for that client that are historically there and past that 150 or 40 or whatever time frame that you've set of days. And it will do all of those. So even if they're 7 years old, it will pull them and put them there. It may take a while, so we'll it'll take a while to do all of that and catch up. And then once it does, then it will just do everything on a regular basis, keeping those rolling. So that is all that you need to do to be able to turn it on for a specific client. Are there any questions about this part? All right, well then that's wrapped up for us. Those are all the settings that you have. A few other notes from clients or from other questions that we got. Somebody asked, after the retention settings are set for our database, is there any message to clients, statement on the home screen, anything? Right now there's not, because these settings don't do anything for them. And for the article or for the reports that are archived, it will show that on the report itself that it has been archived and explain that. When we get to data purging, which will be pretty far down the line, that's when you're going to want to think about really trying to focus hard on messaging this to your clients and making sure that both now who's going to need that data longer, and then when it's happening that they're going to lose data that is past that time frame, so you can configure that. But we are letting you guys market that directly because we don't know how you're setting it up in terms of if you're storing the data for them, if you're delivering it to them, if you are holding it longer or you're not, and kind of whatever stuff that you may have special considerations. So this is something that's fairly personal to your CRA and to your clients, and so that is something that we are not going to do any marketing within the system to the clients about it. There will be notices within the system showing that that something is archived or not, but there's not any like big announcement saying that it's been turned on or anything like that. If you want to change the settings in the future, then you can do that. You can change any of them. Just remember that if you change the archive access, everyone else who has access to it will lose the ability. And if you change the encryption, that all the old files will still need that old encryption key. So the next phase, we addressed this briefly, but just to reiterate, the next phase is probably going to come out sometime in January, where we actually turn the archiving on. But we'll work with you guys and we will announce that more in depth when that happens. We got one question: just suggested wording that communicates accurately the process of when reports will be removed from the system. So one of the things that we have that you can use is one of the very first links that we shared in the chat. I'll paste it again just to make sure that you have it. Is an overview of the policies kind of and how they work in general. And so this isn't, this is exactly what's happening at this phase or anything else, but it kind of gives an overview. It's got some diagrams. So this is what will happen at each stage and walks you through that. So these diagrams, you're welcome to use. The wording, you're welcome to copy. You can take anything from that. And as we move forward, we'll help, create some additional messaging for people to be able to, that you can kind of copy and share But right now we've got a lot of articles explaining everything. You can copy any of that you want to and just slap your own logo on it. Do whatever you want with that. So, all right, any last questions? All right, we're 4 minutes over. That's not too terrible. Again, if you have any other questions, we are happy to help you with anything that you need. We're always here. Just email support@tazworks.com. You can call us, you can chat with us at tazsupport.com. You can chat live, whatever you want to do. We're here to help. We're excited about this. We think it'll do a lot for providing a lot more data security, liability from lawsuits, lots of different things, and improving our system performance. And we appreciate the amount that you guys have worked with us on this, the amount of feedback that we've gotten as we've, done lots of pre-announcements and shared the plan for this and gotten feedback so that we can make tweaks to make sure this fits your needs. So we will, oh, we've got one last question. If you have not done anything to this point except the default settings, so you can change the settings anytime up until we turn on, well, you can do it whenever, but the important deadline will be when we turn on archiving, because if we turn on archiving and you don't have exporting turned on for your clients, then it's not going to export those files. So you need to do that before that. That'll be sometime in January. We don't have deadline set. We will do lots of pre-announcements for that as we work with you guys and make sure that we get to the right time frame that works for the most people possible. So if you haven't done anything when archiving turns on, then the only thing that will happen is 60 days after your expiration date, those reports will not be editable anymore. Nothing will be exported to the external server. You won't have anything, for your clients that will be stored really, really long term. If you're okay with that, then awesome. If you only need data stored for 5 years or less, then you don't need to do anything else. So thanks again, everyone. Reach out to us if you have questions, and have a great rest of your day.